Okay, so good morning again, everybody. Hope everybody had a good break. Had a coffee or tea or whatever, and we're ready for another hour of teaching on shepherding a child's heart. So, last week we talked about the authority, right? The three main themes around this, authority, shepherding, and centrality of the gospel. So we started with authority, and we're going to start getting into the shepherding part, and of course the gospel centrality will come in throughout the entire study. Before we get into the lesson, so today's lesson is about examining and reworking your goals. So this is based on chapter 5 and 6 of this book. I hope everybody has a book. I don't know if yours might look a little differently, because it's an Indian edition, but I'm assuming the chapters are all the same. So we are going to be covering 2 chapters today, which is really about our goals, right? When we started the first introduction, we mentioned something about goals a little bit. So we're going to look at that a little bit more in detail, what are some of the unbiblical goals? How should we convert those to biblical goals? Because ultimately, how we discipline, how we direct our children, it's all going to come down to our goals. Okay, what we teach them, what they end up learning, is going to really come down to the goals that we set. And whether some folks are very organized, they have goals written down. I would say most parents, probably, if you ask them what are your goals, they'll start they'll start sort of hemming and hawing and not really having a clear answer, because they haven't really thought about it. But even if you haven't actually thought about it, you still have some goals. Okay, and those goals are sort of subliminally communicated by your interactions with your children, by the decisions that you make, right? But if you actually have clear goals that you've written down, that you've set out, and you're clear between father and mother, husband and wife, then that will actually help you make wise decisions in the area of parenting. So let's just quickly recap a little bit. So we talked about the the heart, right? What we want to talk about in this course is about the heart, not necessarily changing the behavior without changing the heart. Okay, when you change the heart, then the behavior follows. And we got this from scripture, where the Lord Jesus condemned those who were hypocrites. Okay, he called them hypocrites, those who who honor him with their lips, or honor God with their lips and even with their actions, but their hearts are far from him. It's more, their motivation for doing the good acts was selfish. It was to show themselves. It was to gain the praise of others, right? So what God wants is the heart. And then we looked at shaping influences, how the structure of the home, the kind of background of the family, the relationship between the parents, the values that are in the home, how those have a big influence on children, and we need to try to provide the best possible shaping influences for our children, because of all the children in the world, our children have been born with an advantage, right, from the perspective of God, of their relationship with God, which is that they're born into a home where the parents are believers in Christ. The parents are followers of the Lord Jesus Christ. They are people who try to who are living, or want to live, or desire to live, or try to live according to the principles of the Bible. So we need to shape those influences, but recognizing that alone is not enough. What is more important is actually that your child should develop this thing called a Godward orientation in how they respond, right? How they respond to problems in life, how they respond to things. They have to grow to love and trust God, and not turn to self-reliance, and which is a form of idolatry, right? We looked at the example of Joseph, how he had a lot of bad shaping influences, but yet because of his Godward orientation, he was able to overcome that. We looked at what parenting is. That parenting is a call to shepherd the heart of your child, and it requires clear objectives, right? And then following the the methods and approaches that are in the scriptures, which we're going to study about, right? We talked about that we need to parent with humility and not in anger. We need to discipline in a way that's corrective and not punitive. So I know a lot of people had questions last week about this, and we'll get into the details of of the different kind of punishments and all that kind of stuff. And then we talked about how especially from Hebrews 12, how it says every parent chastens the son that a father chastens the son that he loves, and similarly it says God chastens those that he loves. And if you're not being chastened, it's almost an indication that maybe you don't love the child, right? And so we need to not view discipline and love as exclusive, right? They're not opposites, they're actually the same, right? You express your love by disciplining your child. It's because you love your child. And this is something you need to constantly communicate to your children, that you're not disciplining them to take it out of them. You're not disciplining them to physically hurt them. You're not disciplining them because you're angry or you're mad or they've disappointed you, but it is because of your love for them, right? You want their heart to be in the right place. You want them to have a right attitude and a relationship and an understanding of God. And that's the reason why you discipline them. Okay, so we're going to move into this this thing called basically looking at goals. And I thought I'll start off with an exercise, and I'll ask all of you to just open up your chat windows. Okay, now and I want all of you to participate. Okay, especially I guess it's mostly for the parents. Okay, if you're not a parent, you're married, you might have some answer about what's in your mind, or if you're single, if you have ideas, feel free to participate, but this is mostly for the married with children, okay? And what I want you to do is, again, you can either send it as a message to everyone if you're okay with everyone seeing your answers, or or you can send it as a private message. I assure you, I will not reveal your name. And whatever you say will be with me. So please answer this as honestly as possible. So I want you to, I want you to do this from the child's perspective. Okay, so you have your child, all of you who have children, and this is really a question around how do you define success, right? So I want you to complete this, and please don't over spiritualize. Okay, I know we are all very well versed in bibliology and the words of the Bible and the terminologies and all that, and we know what people want to hear. Okay? I want you to answer this as honestly as your child would answer it. Okay, if I don't get good answers, maybe I'll ask your children to come and answer it. Okay, if we can find them. But here's what I want you to complete the sentence. Okay, what mom and dad want for me is blank blank blank. Okay, dot dot dot. Okay, so please send me some texts, some chats, feedback. Answer this question: what mom and dad want for me is blank. Okay, so if your child was answering this question and they were telling us, well, I know what my mom and dad want for me, and that is the following. Okay, so please go ahead and enter that. Okay, I see one answer. We'll give a few seconds. There we go. Now they're starting to come in. Boy, these are all like good Christian parents. And also, as you do this, ask yourself, if this is really what your child would say based on what you demand of them, okay, or the way that you deal with them, okay. So thank you, Liju. You actually gave us Yana's answer. So yeah, if you have a child near you, you can ask them. Good. Okay, a few more. Come on in. Okay, so y'all can keep putting in your answers, but what I see here is almost looks like almost 90% of the people are saying, they want me to obey them, obey parents, obey and be patient. that I be obedient and God-fearing. Kripa said this, not us. Very good. To be obedient, to obey and listen to what dad and mom says. Yana said, by the way, I'm only quoting names where it's sent to everybody. Yana said, love and care. Okay, very good. A little different than obedience. Obedience and not be hyperactive all the time. Okay, very good. So I guess we can put that in the category of behavior, right? Not being hyperactive. Obedience again. Excel in whatever God has given to me. My studies, obedience, love God. Okay, very good. Here's one. One of the kids says that he wants cake. All right. He must be having a birthday, I think, maybe. To obey, not to hit each other repeatedly. Respect each other. Okay, very good. So respect, obedience. My daughter just said nothing. Okay, well, very good responses here. So another one says, the boy said, obey, respect, follow schedule, plus timings, immediate response. Okay, that's again obedience. Anugrah says to be obedient. Boy, everybody's got obedience down. Huh? To be an obedient child and grow in the Lord. To be kind and to love. Okay, very good. Love people, especially your enemies. Love your sisters, though it's hard sometimes. Okay. That one is from Leanne. Okay, here's another little fellow who says to be Jesus. And then he said to obey God. Okay, very good. Wow, you got some really advanced children here. To be a good girl. To love and obey Jesus and be a strong young woman who stands up to what she believes. All right, and let me go down here. All right, so good. So I think we got a good sampling here, and certainly these are all good goals. Okay, so we're gonna just evaluate these a little bit, and I noticed that everybody has got obedience. But even that, we need to sort of evaluate that, right? And evaluate the motive behind that goal, right? So clearly, a lot of you make it very clear, and you teach your kids the importance of obedience, which is of course a scriptural thing, right? Children are to obey; they are commanded to obey. But I want to just start off by looking at what are some of the unbiblical goals. Okay, and some of these may not be as big of an issue here in this culture, but then some of them are even more of an issue in this culture than in others. So that will come out as we go. Obviously, all parents would have some idea of success, right? They want their children to do well. All right. Now, what I didn't see in that list is people saying, I want my children to do well in their studies, or I want them to get a good job, or I want them to do well in life, right? And of course, I think many of you, being very good Christian parents, would probably not put those down. But as we go through this, ask yourself, okay, do I really have some of that in me, right? Do I really yearn for that? Is that subliminally part of what I want, right? So what does do well mean, right? Sometimes it means an adult life filled with opportunity and unfettered by problems, right? It says that in the book. They want their children to be successful so they can do well. Okay, others want them to develop special skills, so they want them to become a good sportsman, or a good musician, or a great instrument player, or a great singer. Okay, and we go to all kinds of length, to take the children to different activities. I've not seen this be a big issue over here, but keep in mind this book was written by an American author, primarily aimed at American culture, U.S. culture, where this is very, very real, right? I mean, I remember when Timothy was I don't even know how old he was. He must have been 5 or 6 or something, it was like a thing, if you had a boy, you took him for, sports. Okay. So I enrolled him in something called Little League Baseball. And the poor fellow couldn't even throw a ball. He would try to throw it and it would land like, 2 feet from his feet. And so I remember I spent so much time with him, just getting him to throw and get the action right. And, we would play catch in the backyard for hours. Finally, he could actually throw, and he became pretty decent at it. I think he played for a couple of years or something. And then we gave up because, ultimately that wasn't the big thing, but a lot of parents are really, so when you go and participate in these, you see how, some parents are so into this stuff, okay, and they're so passionate about it, and they'll, you have, in the US, they have a whole class of mothers. They call them soccer moms, okay. They call football soccer. So soccer mom is somebody who has a minivan, okay, that's their vehicle of choice. It's like a stereotype. It's a very, very valid stereotype, I would say. Okay, they have a minivan where they bundle their kids, and they basically spend, after they come from school, every day of the week, they've got a different activity. One day it's baseball, another day it's football, another day it's ballet for their daughters, another day it's some music, sometimes it's more than one, and they basically spend their whole lives shuttling them through all of these activities. And when they come to these games, they get so passionate and they start getting angry if things don't work out for their child. And, and their goal is that, the children should be recognized. They should develop these skills that society values, right? Society values sports and music and talent very highly, right? So this is again a goal, and what we have to ask ourselves is this a biblical goal, right? What ultimately are you trying to achieve? You're trying to get people's approval. You're trying to, get the kid, the child to develop skills, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the question is, why are you doing it, right? What is the goal behind it? Another one is psychological adjustment, okay, or building self-esteem, okay. And so parents think that they have to build self-esteem into their children. Of course, children need self-esteem, but this is what we're talking about is going overboard, right? So they and there's a lot of psychological teaching out there. There's a lot of advisors, people writing books about this thing, about how your child is born with low self-esteem and how you need to boost them up and make them feel better. And in fact, going back to that sports thing, where they actually combine, these two concepts, right? Self-esteem with skill. And so in a lot of sports, sports programs in the US now, they don't recognize winners and losers anymore. Everybody gets a certificate of participation, right? I think many of us might have got in the VBS and all, when you go for VBS, to bring it to a spiritual realm, right? You get, somebody wins the medal and the first place and second place, and then everybody else gets a certificate of participation. So at some point they said, that's a self-esteem, creates self-esteem problems for the children that don't win. So let's just stop giving first place and second place. Everybody is the same. Now, is that, think about that, right? You're building up self-esteem, but what's the cost of that? You get a whole bunch of children who grow up not realizing what the real world is like. That's not the way it works in the real world. Okay, in the real world, it's the guy who performs. Of course, there's unfairness and all that. I'm not talking about that. But if you want to get the promotion or you want to get the salary increase, you have to deliver. You have to perform, right? I mean, you have to do well, right? It's based on merit. So you're really giving the children the wrong message, right? You think about self-esteem is all about the child, right? So you build up the child, okay? Whereas when you look biblically, what does it say? It says that we are to be the servant. The Son of Man came to serve and not to be served, right? So what should be our goal is to make our children into servants, thinking about others and not so much of themselves. So that's another group. Now, well-behaved children. So many of us, I guess you can think of the obedience thing there. Okay, so we want well-behaved children, and why is that? Because again of social pressure, right? So having well-behaved children a good goal. I mean, it's nothing wrong with it, but it's really not. When you think about it, it's not really a biblical goal. Okay, well-behaved children should be an outcome, right? It's an outcome of the heart. Okay, it is not what you want to achieve. You want children who are well-behaved because they have a certain character within them. Not children who only behave well. They're just behaviorists. Like they know what to do. Because what happens if you approach this with the wrong attitude or the wrong motivation is children become manipulators, right? They know they'll behave well when they want something, and we try to, the goal drives how you try to achieve it. So you will try to achieve, good behavior at all costs. And that means you might do a lot of things which we'll talk about next week, such as bribing them, such as rewarding them when they exhibit good behavior without considering what's the hard attitude behind it. And you try to teach them, as long as you do what dad wants or mom wants, as long as you keep quiet in the church, as long as you do all this, you'll get what you want, right? And dad and mom don't really care that I'm being hypocritical. They don't really care what the real attitude is. They don't really care whether I'm doing it, out of good intention or to manipulate them, right? So think of, well-behaved children is really should be a secondary outcome of biblical parenting. Okay, it should be a secondary outcome that happens because you've been able to shepherd the heart of the child. Anyway, we'll talk more about that. Of course, one that is very, very relevant to our Indian culture, okay, is good education. All right, now think about, and I'm sure that if we all had to be honest with ourselves, we would have to admit that this is important to us, okay? Because, when you think about the effort we go to and the money we pay to put our children in good schools and the deposits that we pay and how much emphasis we put on grades and how much we go after them when they don't get good grades, it's clear that this is, and of course our society, promotes education, right? And of course, education is a good thing. Nothing wrong with education. Education uplifts people. If you want to survive in life, you need education. But there's a different goal for education. The purpose of, what is the purpose of education for a Christian, right? Is it just to get a degree? Is it just to, and by the way, this would apply to all kinds of education, okay? Even people going for theological education, okay? Now, why are you doing that? Okay, are you doing it just to get a degree so that people will respect you? Are you doing that because you think that that's the way to get a good job or, good ministry opportunities? It's because, I want my children to become a doctor because that way they'll get good marriage proposals and they'll be set for life, right? Go back to the first bullet there. An adult life filled with opportunity and unfettered by problems. If my child can become an engineer or can become a doctor or whatever, a financial advisor, they can have a good life, right? And so I got to make sure that they get educated and parents. And how do you know this? Well, by the amount of time you spend with them on tuition and going over their homework. By the way, I'm not saying don't help them with their homework or anything, but the zeal and the pressure that we put ourselves under, right? The pressure we put ourselves. I mean, you look at these children in the 10th and the 12th and all committing suicide, right? Because of the pressure of grades. It's really amazing. Okay, and even we put that pressure. I mean, I know, the people that I work with, these are people that work directly for me. They are under so much tension when the exam time comes in. And honestly, I'm thankful to God that, when it comes to my kids' education, I've never had much tension about it. Okay, I don't even, honestly, I mean, this is probably not a good thing, but I'm not even, staying in the loop on what exams they have coming up. Okay, but having said that, I do instruct them. I do make sure that they're studying, and if I find that they're not putting in an effort, then we have a talk about it. But at the end of the day, what grades they get, is not something that I spend a whole lot of time worrying about. Because there are a lot of ultimately getting good grades and getting a great degree from a great college is not indication of what they're going to be in life. Okay, and certainly not at all an indication of what kind of spiritual life they're going to have. Okay. And so I think this is something we have to watch out for, and if we are all very honest with ourselves, we will say this is something that that is a goal, but is it a biblical goal, right? So we are so wedded to success coming from education. Okay, then another one is they simply want to control their children. Okay, parents want to control. Okay, this sort of goes with that obedience and the good behavior thing. It's somewhat related to those two. So they want children who are manageable, children that will always do the right thing. Okay, whatever is the right thing at the moment, when I tell them, they will do it. Right? Again, that's a great secondary outcome to have, but is it really the right goal? So we'll come back to that thought, right? But the fact is that, and then the last one, which I can't skip, which is the goal of salvation. Okay, so I'm surprised that nobody. I was looking through that. I think some people said following Jesus and all that. So we have a goal of salvation. So let me ask you: is this really a biblical goal? Okay, something that we should think about, because by the way, of course, we want our children to be saved, right? But is this a sufficient goal? So what happens when we make salvation our goal is that we tend to create children who say the right things and do the right things because that's what expected of them, and then they end up not saved. We had a very interesting discussion going on one of the WhatsApp groups here with several of the men at CBF this week, talking about a guy that many of us knew, who was a believer, supposedly a believer. He was in one of the assemblies, in at least 2 or 3 different assemblies here in Bangalore. Got married, and now he has completely abandoned the Christian faith. And in fact, he made a video. There's a group putting out videos of ex-Christians, people who came out of Christianity, and he came on there, and apparently he's now a Hindu, probably a member of the RSS. And he's talking about, and when you listen to him talk, he says, I grew up in this way. I grew up in a family where we had to get up at 5 o'clock every morning, and we had to sing, and we spend 1 hour, talking about the family prayer or family altar, and somebody gave the thoughts, and then, I was given this message of salvation from the day I was born, and eventually it was just the thing that I had to do. Okay, because that's what you did. If you wanted acceptance in our culture, if you wanted acceptance in our, the groups that we were with, in our church, you had to believe, okay? You had to be born again. And he talked about how, he never felt any change. He never felt anything in his life, but he had to become born again. So he became born again. And then later on, when he started, questioning all of these things, and he got ostracized, and eventually, it led to this journey, and he's gone away from the faith. Okay, probably was never saved to begin with, and obviously, he grew up in a godly family, and his parents had this wonderful goal that he should be saved. He was saved, he was baptized, he was married into a Christian, supposedly a believer, and all these kind of things. But in reality, he checked all the boxes. But the problem is that we think that when I put salvation up here, or when that's in the book, the point is that we shouldn't make salvation as the goal. Okay, salvation again should be an outcome of pursuing a different goal, right? Because what happens is we are satisfied, and we have this mentality that says, "Oh, my child is saved. Okay, next check the box thing is baptized. They have to be baptized." So let's make sure. Many of you, before you were in the Gulf, before you left the Gulf, your parents wanted to make sure that you were baptized, because God forbid that you go off unbaptized and go get wayward, right? And sometimes it becomes a way to manipulate as well, right? Oh, you're saved. Oh, you're baptized. You can act that way, right? So and then the other problem is that we think that we have this false notion that the moment our children get saved, then all our problems are solved. Okay, now if you are an honest believer, you know that salvation doesn't solve all your problems. Okay, you look at anybody, even after they're saved, and the struggles they have to go through, and the whole process of sanctification, right? It doesn't stop there. right? It does not change the basic issues of child rearing. Your child, let's say they say a prayer, or the sinner's prayer, or they go to VBS or Sunday school, and they repeat a prayer and all this kind of stuff. Do they change overnight? You still see the same attitude, right? You still need to shepherd their heart, right? You still need to teach them. So salvation, just being satisfied with saved children, oh, well, my children are doing this and that, but you know what? They're saved. They said a prayer when they were 8 years old or 12 years old or whatever, right? That's good enough, right? They got their ticket to heaven. So again, just having their salvation as a goal is also not purely biblical. Okay, so let's remember that. Another goal might be family worship. Okay, we want to make sure that we have family worship, and this becomes a ritual in the home because we think that just doing that, okay, so it becomes an end in itself. Okay, it's not a means to an end, right? It's not a means to an end in directing the child to God. We think that just doing this sort of automatically in a vote and as a ritual, that should be the goal, right? But there was no, and while we do this, on the other hand, you have a lot of issues going on in the marriage, issues going on in the home. You got anger issues, you got impatience issues, you got abuse issues in some homes, right? Obviously, there's a dissonance there, and children sort of see through that. Okay? So these are some of the goals that we see, and let's keep in mind that the Bible strongly warns us against being influenced by the culture around us. Okay, in fact, you look at God's command to the Israelites. They were to drive the nations. And why were they to drive the nations out? When you go back to the book of Deuteronomy, it's very clear. He says you stay away from them, because what was God's concern is that, you will, that they will corrupt you, they will pollute you and make you go after their gods. Okay. And that's why God was so particular that they were to go and capture them and destroy them and not intermarry with them and all these kind of things, right? So the thing about intermarriage was not about the prohibition against intermarriage between the Jewish people, the Israelites, and the non-Jewish people was not about racial superiority or inferiority, any of those things. He says it very clear, okay, that it's because that if you marry their daughters and you give your daughters, as marriage to their sons, what will happen is they will turn your heart away from me. Okay, so we have to be careful that as we look at these cultural goals and what people are wanting us to do, and always, when you think about what are my goals for my children, ask myself, what is the source of this goal? Okay, is it my parents, my in-laws? Is it my friends? Is it the people that I hang around with? People at work? Oh, where's your child going to college, or what's your child doing? Right? That pressure is always there, right? So we are subject to the powerful influence of our culture, and we must reject the things in the culture that God doesn't approve of, right? And in 1 Peter 2, verse 9 to 12, I'm not going to turn there. It talks about how we are to be different. Okay, we are to be an example to the world. We are a special people, right? And Paul warns about worldly philosophies in Colossians 2, 6 to 8. He says, let's just read that. Colossians 2. Read Colossians chapter 2, verse 6 says, as you therefore have received Christ Jesus, so walk in him, rooted and built up in him and established in the faith as you have been taught, abounding in it with thanksgiving. Now listen to verse 8. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and you are complete in him, who is the head of all principality and power. Okay. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. So we need to re-examine our goals, right? And make sure that that we are rejecting unbiblical objectives and we are embracing biblical objectives for our children, right? So what is a goal? Okay, what is a what is a worthy goal? If we were to capture this goal in one phrase, what would it be, right? So we talked about a vision. Okay, vision, is the love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your might. That was a vision that we got from Deuteronomy chapter 6. But what should be, what should be the ultimate goal of man's life, right? So way back in the early church, they put together this something called the Shorter Catechism. Okay, now that sounds a little ominous when we use the word catechism and all that. We think it has something to do with Catholics, but it's not really anything about Catholics. It's just sort of a creed. It's a set of things that there's some 100-odd questions, that are part of, and it's a good thing, by the way. You should go and look it up and check it, and it really helps crystallize some of the fundamental truths of the Christian faith, and really a worthy biblical goal comes from 1 Corinthians 10:31, okay, which is that whatever you do, okay, whether you eat, whether you drink, whatever you do it all for the glory of God, right? And then the first question in the Shorter Catechism, this is something that they would teach, people would teach, you would ask the question and then you would learn the answer, right? And it was a way to memorize sort of the basic, basic tenets of human life and of Christianity and what the way that we as Christians should live. So first question in the Shorter Catechism is, what is the chief end of man? Okay, or what is the chief goal? What is the chief purpose for which God created man, right? And the answer was, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And there's two parts there, right? One is to glorify God. His chief objective, his chief goal in life is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. So it's about a relationship. It's about a two-way relationship with God, right? It's about doing things to glorify God. And if we set this as a goal, right? So the goal is not education, it is to glorify God. The goal is not to become obedient, it is to glorify God. The goal is not, to have a fulfilled, happy life, it is to glorify God, right? It's to glorify God in your education, it's to glorify God in your behavior, it's to glorify God in the kind of life you have, right? It's to glorify God in the way that you behave, right? You obey in order to glorify God. So ultimately it comes down to making this as the main goal, right? So this is the worthy goal that we should all have, right? So we'll take a look at how this modifies or brings a different twist to the kind of goals that we typically have. And this is sort of, think of this as the goal behind the goal, okay? It's the primary goal, right? The primary goal we have, and when we pursue this primary goal, okay, you will achieve a lot of those secondary goals, like, children who study well, children who do well, children who obey, right? But then it'll be for the right reasons, because you're shepherding them to do it in a way that glorifies God, with the right heart attitude, right? So always keep this in mind, that the chief end of man, this is, by the way, not just for children, right? This should be the goal for you and me, for everybody. Okay, what is the chief end of man? Okay, what is my chief end? What is the chief end of my job? That the way I do my job, I should glorify God. Now, how do I glorify God in my job? I do it, according to Ephesians chapter 6. Okay, I do all things as unto the Lord. I do all things not as a man pleaser, but as a God pleaser, right? I am obedient to my master, right? I do the best that I can, right? Because ultimately it is God who gets glorified by me doing a good job, not my boss, not anybody else. But that's the reason I do it, not for the purpose of getting a merit increment, and not for the purpose of getting a promotion. And if God blesses you with that, great. Okay, but the question we have to ask ourselves is, in my job today, am I glorifying God? Okay, am I doing my job so well that God would be pleased with the quality of my work, that God would be pleased with the attitude that I show towards my fellow employees? Okay, and then of course, enjoying him, right? Do I have that relationship with God as my child grows up? Is he or she really getting to know God, right? Is he building up that relationship with the Lord? So we need to teach our children to use their abilities and their attitudes and their talents and their intelligence to glorify God rather than make their lives better. So why should you study well? Okay, because God is glorified, not because you're going to get a job, or not because you're going to, why should you go and get this degree? Okay, because, it gives you abilities to, and talents and knowledge that with which you can glorify God. Is that what you're trying to do? When we try to make those decisions, as children grow up and they go into their teenage years, it's something you have to ask. Why do they want to go study that? What is the purpose? What are they trying to achieve? Right? Are they being guided by God? Are they being guided by this goal of wanting to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever? Or are they being guided by worldly goals? Right? When you think about the way we choose what courses we study and all these kind of things, it's all about, oh, well, that's going to get you a good job. And of course, in this day and age, you don't know what's going to get you a good job because the world is changing so fast, right? So go back to the basics here, okay? So what does it mean for shepherding, okay? So it means that in every context, we need to set a biblical worldview before our children, okay? So it means that we need to teach what is a biblical worldview. It means thinking according to the Bible. It means interpreting the world according to the Bible. Okay, why is the world the way it is? Why is there sin in the world? Why is there suffering in the world? Where did all the stuff that we see come from, right? Now, there's a secular worldview and there's a biblical worldview, right? So our objective, and in order to achieve this objective, you have to do this, right? In every context, you need to put before them this biblical worldview, and they must be taught that they are creatures made in the image of God, that they are made for God, that God desired to have fellowship with them. But again, this is the centrality of the gospel, right? Even in our goals, the gospel comes in. So ultimately, the only way that you can glorify God and enjoy Him forever is to get into a relationship with Him, right? Is to go to Him and accept the free gift of salvation, right? That was purchased for us on the cross of Calvary by the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, you can have all the talents and all of these things, as Jesus Himself said. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul, right? So we need to think about that, right? So they must be taught that man was made in the image of God. They must learn that they will only find themselves as they find God, that self-esteem and all of these kind of things come in, based on the value that God has put in them, the fact that they're created in the image of God. And think about what you teach them about their looks, when you teach them about how they should look or how they should dress or how they should do this or that. You're sending them a message that your looks are what is important, right? Your value is in looks. People need to think of you well by the way you dress and the way you cut your hair and the way you conduct yourself and all of these kind of things. And then they start thinking that these are what is important, rather than, getting value in the fact that they are somebody made in the image of God, right? They must grow to the point of, like David, who says, Psalm 73:25, whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire beside you. That desire for God. Okay, now this is not an easy goal to achieve. Okay, I can tell you that, as I look at all of my kids, the grown-up ones, they're all at different points in this journey. Okay, and I say that all of them, are where I would like them to be spiritually, but they're not. Okay, they're all at different points. They're at different places. There are glimpses of things that I see that please me. There are other glimpses that don't. But again, that whole journey starts in childhood. And as they grow in their faith, your hope is that the things that you taught them and the worldview that you put into them will direct them in the right path. So we must present to them the objectives to pursue and the ways of solving problems that are biblical. Okay, this is what the worldview is. Train them to think biblically. Okay, because that's the difference between rules and laws, right? Where we tell them you do this or don't do that, because the world changes. Okay, in 20 years from now, 15 years from now, when your 2-year-old is going to college, the world is going to be so different. The problems are going to be so different. The challenges are going to be so different. But the Word of God, okay, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Okay? It has everything we need for life, pertaining to life and godliness, right? And so you have to train them to think biblically. Take a problem. How do I approach this biblically? And of course, they learn that by how you deal with problems. That's why the example of the parents is so important. So now we're going to just talk about, looking back at all those goals that we had, and we're going to rework them. Okay, so I got a table here. So let's just go through each one of these. So we said some of the worldly goals are around, a worldly goal or a goal that comes from culture is to build a sense of self-worth and confidence and self-trust. So you believe in yourself because you've trained yourself and you've got all these abilities. Now, how do you turn that into, how do you rework that, right? Okay, how do you rework that into a goal that's oriented to a biblical worldview? Okay, here are some examples. You exercise and care for your body as an expression of the stewardship for God's gift. So you need to tell your children, why should you exercise? Okay, why should you maybe get involved in some sports? It is to exercise. It is to train your body, just to discipline yourself. Why? Because that is part of your responsibility as a steward of what God has given you. Why do you not allow certain things into your body? Because you have to steward it for the glory of God, right? God has given you certain gifts, right? Maybe it's a gift of physical strength or athletic ability, or maybe it's a gift of smartness, right? Okay, but you need to develop those. Why? Okay, not so that other people will praise you, not so that you will achieve something in the world, but rather so that you can use the gifts that God has given you, the talents that God has given you for His glory. Okay, let's talk about psychological adjustment. Okay, the worldly or the cultural goal is to be effective with people, to build self-esteem. But what is a biblical view or worldview goal for this? It is to find your worth in God and not yourself, to serve others. Okay, so you need to teach them that you become adjusted, you become you get self-esteem, you draw your self-esteem from what God thinks of you, of who you are in God, that you are made in the image of God, and you serve others, right? You're not trying to do things. So when we talk about psychological adjustment, so we'll say somebody is not, what's the word I'm looking for, socially adept, or they don't have social skills, okay? So what we mean by that is that they don't have a way to manipulate the situation to get what they want, okay? But what are we supposed to do, okay? Biblically, we're supposed to serve others. When you look at well-behaved children, all right, what is the worldly goal behind that? Behind that objective is to seek the approval of men rather than God, right? We want people to say, oh, what well-behaved children. I can tell you, whenever we have all a lot of kids, we would go to a restaurant in the US to eat or something, and we would sit there and our kids have always been, pretty well-behaved, and they will sit there quietly and not be screaming and yelling and all these kind of things. And of course, we always do attention because, there's the two of us, and then there's, 4 or 5 or 6, 7 children sitting around there. And the first thing, somebody will come to us while they're leaving and say, excuse me, are these all your children? So that's the first question. Okay. And then we say, oh yeah, they're all ours. Really? Oh, wow, that's wonderful. And then the next thing they say is, you must be so proud of them. They're such well-behaved children. And you can just see your head going like, oh, thank you very much. Is that really the goal? No, but what are we supposed to do? We have to teach our children that they have to look out for the interest of others. Okay, why should they be well-behaved in the restaurant? Okay, let's just take that example. Okay, they go there and when they scream and things, what are they doing? They're disturbing everybody else. They're causing chaos for everybody else. They're, impinging on other people's privacy, and people have come there to have a good dinner and things like that, or when they go to church for that matter, okay, and they're screaming and yelling, right? Think about the principle of loving your neighbor. Okay, you show that you love them by doing what is valuable for them, right? So look out for the interest of others, like Philippians 2, verse 20-21, always be looking out for others. So that's a biblical goal, right? The reason that we want our children to be well-behaved is for the right reasons. It is because not behaving well, okay, it causes trouble for others, right? Their heart must be in the right place. You must do it for the right reasons. Okay, let's move on to the good education. So in the worldly sense, we want to achieve academic awards and recognition, good grades, because that sets you up for worldly success, okay? But, what's the way to have a biblically oriented goal around education? It is that you learn to work and study diligently and faithfully for God. Okay, God has promised to reward faithfulness. God has said, He's not, God never. When you look at the way God works, he doesn't really focus so much on results. Okay, but he focuses on faithfulness. And take the parable of those three servants, right? One was given 1 talent, one was given 5 talents, one was given 10 talents. Okay, now the guy who got 10, he came back with 10, right? 10 more. The other guy came back with 5 more, and the other guy did nothing. Okay, now who does God bless there, and who does he condemn, and how does he do it? Does he say to the guy who came back with 10, oh, wow, amazing, you came first. Okay, you got more than this other guy. All right, no, he doesn't. Okay, he says to both of them, because both of them worked faithfully, they were faithful in doing the wish of their master, the desire of the master, and they came back, they multiplied it, they did their work, and he said, you have been faithful over little, I will give you responsibility for much, right? But what does he say to the last one? He says, you unfaithful servant, right? God wants faithfulness, and that's what you have to. And when I like I said, grades is not something I spend a lot of time over. But one thing I do is that you can always sense, not every child is the smartest. Okay, they're not all going to get the same grades. They're not, they don't have the same intellectual capacity, and that's okay, right? But you have to recognize that. Now, what I do always talk to my children about in terms of education is when I see that they're not putting in the effort or they're being lazy. Okay, and it's a laziness and their sloppiness and their lack of focus that's leading to, to the bad results. Okay, so yesterday I had a talk with one of my kids who I will not name, reviewing the assignments and some very simple math problems. Okay, it was obvious that this child of mine just didn't pay any attention, didn't read. This child knew exactly what the right answer was, but got it wrong. Okay, so my point there was, look, you're not paying attention. Your heart is not in it. You're getting distracted by other things. That doesn't glorify God, right? Learn to work and study diligently and faithfully for God, and God will reward your faithfulness in some way. It may not be with a 90% grade or 70 or 80, but he will reward you. Okay, that's what God wants. So that's how you turn the education goal into something that's biblical. Okay, then salvation. So the worldly goal is to think that salvation fulfills your responsibility as a parent. That's it. I'm done. Okay, my child is saved. Praise the Lord. Okay, I'm happy. You should be happy. My child is saved. They're baptized. And then later on you say, oh my goodness, how could that have happened? He was saved. He got up and gave his testimony. He got baptized. He got baptized by this very famous evangelist. Okay, so we give credit to all these things that are meaningless, right? What are we to do? How do we turn that into a biblical goal? To teach them the ways of God. It goes beyond just salvation. We have to teach them repentance and faith for all of life. It's not just for salvation. We have to spiritually nurture them. That's why, nowhere, by the way, if you look in scripture, nowhere does it say that you have to bring your children to salvation. Okay, nowhere. You will not find a verse that says that. Okay, what does it say? You are to raise them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Okay, you have to instruct them in the word. You have to nurture. You have to shepherd them. Okay, in the ways of God, in the ways, and ultimately, because why God doesn't tell us that? Because ultimately salvation is His doing. Okay, I cannot save my child. If I try to do that, that's not going to work. All right, only God can save your child, but I have a responsibility to bring them up in a way that they hear the gospel, they understand the gospel, they know what the gospel life is. Okay, they know how the gospel should impact life, so that they realize it's not just a rite or a ritual or a ceremony. Okay, think about all the religions of the world. They've got ceremonies. You take the Jewish people. They have that. I forget the name. A ceremony they do with their kids when they turn 11 or 12. It's a coming of age ceremony. Okay.
Bar mitzvah.
Bar mitzvah. Thank you. Okay, they do all this or take the Catholic Church, right? You have the first communion or the confirmations, as they call it, right? These are all rituals, okay? And unfortunately, we even as believers, we create these kind of rituals and coming of age kind of things subtly, right? So very often you'll say, if you have a child that's wayward, or in their, in the definition of people, they're not saved, they're not baptized, there's a big concern, right? Or what a sad thing, right? Of course it's sad. I mean, we're sad that somebody's, going to, perish for all eternity. Okay, but the opposite is that we think that just because somebody ticked the box and stood up at the VBS and got baptized, we think they're saved. Okay, and they may not be. So we have to teach them, they have to model the ways of God. What does a gospel life look like, right? And then family worship, substituting rituals for real life application of the scripture. So, family, in a biblical worldview of family worship, is a means to knowing God. It's a vehicle for shepherding and nurturing. It's a way to read the word and teach your children how to apply it. Okay, it's not an end in itself. It is a means to an end. Okay, and the end is to know God, right? You want the children to know God and to go back to this, right? To have this goal, achieve this goal, where they grow up and they become men and women who glorify God, and they learn to enjoy Him. That He becomes somebody that's driving the decisions they make, driving the goals of their life, right? That's the way we turn all of these worldly cultural goals, into biblical biblical worldview goals. So the things on the left column, there's nothing wrong with any of those. What makes them an appropriate goal or not, it really depends on how we approach it, right? What is behind it? What is our motivation behind it? So I think it's important that all of you sit down, and please, what I would ask you to do is please go and read the chapters if you haven't already, and then sit down with your wife and take this seriously. Okay, I mean, many of you start taking this seriously when you have kids, and then they start misbehaving, and then only you start worrying about it. Okay, and we think there's a magic bullet. Okay, whether that's spanking or whatever, everybody's looking for a magic bullet. Okay, there is no magic bullet. Sit down with your wife and ask yourself, what is our goal for this? Because you look at all of those things; those are all areas in which you make decisions. You're going to make decisions about their education. You're going to make decisions about what to get them, what not to get them. You're going to make decisions about all kinds of things, okay, in their life. And if you don't have these goals set and you're not evaluating, why am I thinking that way? I want my child to go to, the best university in the world, okay, or the most, well-known. Why do I want that? Does that really make sense? Does that align with what God would want? Does that align with what I want for his or her life? And I'll just give you a close with a very, very good an illustration. It's a real life illustration of an old man that I met back in the US. He was a believer, and he had a bit of a tough life, but and I think it just captures this, right? And he had two sons. All right, now I only knew about the one son because he would always bring the son with him. He would come for the meetings and for some of our Wednesday Bible studies and all that. This is back when we were in the US, and he would bring the son. And this son was physically challenged. Okay, he was handicapped, and I guess he had a Downs or something. Quite an extreme form of Downs, but a very sweet boy. So he was quite old. The son must have been like 35 or 40 or something, but physically wasn't developed and emotionally wasn't very developed, and he would always be sort of sitting like this, and you just looked at him, you would feel very sorry. But this child, he knew the Lord. Okay, and I got to tell you, there's something special about these children with Down syndrome or people with Down syndrome and diseases like that at least in my observation, where they seem to have a special ability to connect with God. And he would even pray and stuff. Okay, I mean, he would pray during the prayer and such beautiful prayers, and it was tough to still follow him, his words, but if you listen carefully, you could get it, and he would really pray. So anyway, so one day I was talking to this man, and he was telling me, he said, so I was talking about his kids and this son of his, and then he had another son. Okay, so he started talking to me about his other son, and he was so proud of that son, and he said, what, he was admitted into this very elite program in Duke University. Okay, so now Duke University is one of the top-notch schools in the universities in the United States, and it's very hard to get into. And he was going on and on about how he had done this research and that research and this and that, and he got admitted into this elite program. He's one of only a handful of people, and now he's doing this, and he's working there, and he's doing this and that and the other, and he went on and on and on, and he wouldn't say a word about this other son, and after a while I kept hearing this, and all this praise for this son of his who was achieving so much in the world and was so smart and everything, and I don't know, I just felt led to ask him a question, and I wasn't trying to I didn't know what the answer would be, but I was just prompted to ask this man this question. I said, brother, that's really good to hear that, and that your son is such an accomplished person. I know you're very proud of him. And I asked him, brother, does he know the Lord? Okay, does he know the Lord? And you could immediately see, and up until that point, he had been waxing eloquent about the son, and his demeanor just changed completely, and he just hung his head, and he said, you know what? That's the only problem. Okay, he's far, far away from the Lord. Okay, now here you have a son of his who is really walking with the Lord despite his handicap and his mental condition and all that, and here's another son who is by all worldly standards so accomplished but not walking with the Lord, right? We need to think about what are the things that we are aspiring, and a lot of the goals we have for our children that we impose upon our children are our own goals. Okay, we are vicariously trying to live through them, right? And we need to sort of guard against that. We need to evaluate all of our things. We don't want to be in that situation where our children end up being the best of the best and achieving so much in the world, but we'll have to hang our head in shame and say, but they don't know the Lord, right? And it's not just that they're not saved, they just don't know the Lord. They have no interest in the Lord, right? So we need to go beyond, that the whole salvation experience is something that God should bring to them, and we prepare the ground for that, right? We prepare the ground for that by the way we train them, by the way we shepherd their hearts, by the way we model the gospel life, by the goals that we set for ourselves. If you are a parent whose goal is to make money and have a big house and all that, your kids are going to pick that up. Okay, as they say, apple doesn't fall far from the tree. All right, he or she is going to pick up all of those things. So please do read the chapters, and I would encourage you to really discuss this with your spouse, okay, and think about these things, okay. So I'm just looking to see maybe we have a minute or two for any questions. So somebody made a point that on the first question is that our kids are probably too young to be thinking about job, money, and fame. You're absolutely right. I think the purpose of that question was just to sort of get you to think about what's your goals, okay, for your children, right? Not necessarily what the children would say. But anyway, that was good. So anybody want to ask any questions? And next week we'll be studying. And please do read ahead. We are looking at unbiblical methods. Okay, so before we go into the biblical methods of raising your children or discipline or whatever you want to call it, right? Biblical methods, which are communication and the rod. We're going to talk about unbiblical methods. So the week after next, we'll start getting into communication and other things. Okay, we'll get more practical. So far we've been laying the foundation. We talked about the heart. We talked about shaping influences and Godward orientation. We talked about authority, right? We talked about goals. All right, got to have the right goals. Then only will the right methods work, right? To achieve the right goals. Otherwise, the methods don't make sense. And so next week, before we get into the actual methods, we'll talk about the unbiblical methods. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions? We have a pretty large audience here. Almost 40 people over here. It's 38. Does anybody have maybe one question that I can answer on anything I've talked about? You can send the question over chat, or open your mic, mute and ask. Okay, looks like nobody has any questions. Okay, if anybody wants to ask questions later privately, please message me. I'm happy to answer any questions we have. Okay. All right, good everybody. Just have a good lunch and get some rest, and God bless you all. Bye.